Welcome to this explainer on the anatomy of a trade. Look, if you're gearing up for the Series 66 exam, you already know the deal. The test doesn't just want you to vaguely recognize a few vocab words. It wants you to actively recall exactly how the mechanics of trading work when you're under pressure. So today, we're tearing down the walls of the trading floor. We're going to look at the quotes, the orders, the margin rules, and exactly how the house gets paid. By the end of this, you won't just know these terms. You'll literally be seeing them in your sleep.
Real quick, before we jump into the market chaos, this explainer is brought to you by Cert Fuel. Look, studying for the Series 66 can honestly feel like trying to drink from a fire hose, but Cert Fuel has a full Series 66 course with adaptive study quizzes, smart flashcards, and unlimited practice exams that are weighted exactly like the real thing. It'll actually tell you where your weak spots are. Go check them out at certfuel.com. All right, let's talk about trading.
Section 1. The spread. Iris the investor goes shopping. Okay, let's dive into this by introducing Iris the investor. Iris is walking onto the trading floor, and she is a super picky shopper looking at two different prices for the exact same asset, the bid and the ask. To Iris, this looks like a bizarre flea market. But here is the golden rule of the quote. The bid is the absolute highest price a buyer is willing to pay. The ask, which is also known as the offer, is the lowest price a seller is willing to accept. When you see a quote, it's always those two numbers together, like 50 bid, 50.25 ask. And the gap between those two numbers, that is your bid-ask spread. If the spread is narrow, it generally means high liquidity, meaning tons of buyers and sellers are actively trading. If the spread is wide, well, you're looking at a thinly traded, low liquidity security where participants are pretty scarce.
Now, let's pause the explainer for a second. Think about Iris making her trade here. Is the bid-ask spread free? Take a beat. Lock in your answer.
Exam trap. The spread is absolutely not free. It is an implicit transaction cost. The exam loves to test if you recognize this fact. Even though no one is sending Iris a physical invoice in the mail for the spread, if she buys at the ask price of 50.25 and immediately changes her mind and sells at the unchanged bid of 50.00, she just lost a full round-trip spread. That's 25 cents a share gone into the ether just for crossing the spread. Section 2. Order types, execution versus price. Whenever you place an order, you have to choose what you value more. You literally cannot have both. A market order guarantees the greatest certainty of execution. You are getting that stock promptly, at the best available price. But it does not guarantee price. In a super fast-moving market, Iris might experience slippage and pay way more than she thought she would. A limit order flips that completely. It guarantees price. You will only buy at your limit price or better. But it does not guarantee execution. If the stock never drops to Iris's buy limit price, she just sits there empty-handed forever. Then we have stop and stop limit orders. These don't guarantee execution or price initially, they just guarantee an action gets triggered when a certain price is hit.
Which leads us directly into a massive exam trap. You absolutely must memorize what these orders turn into once they are triggered. A standard stop order, that becomes a market order. If it's a sell stop placed below the market to limit losses and the price drops and hits it, boom, it triggers, and Iris is selling immediately at the next available market price, whatever that happens to be. But a stop limit order, that becomes a limit order when triggered. Yes, it protects her price, but if the market is totally crashing, that limit order might never actually fill, and Iris just rides the stock all the way down to zero. Stop equals market. Stop limit equals limit. Section 3. Margin and the Fed. Carl the client gets reckless.
Let's leave cautious Iris behind for a minute and introduce Carl the client. Carl wants to borrow money from his broker-dealer because Carl loves leverage. 50%. Burn this number into your retinas. This is the initial margin requirement for new eligible equity purchases in a standard margin account. Think of it as the entry bar. If Carl wants to buy $10,000 worth of stock on margin, he generally needs to show up with at least 50% or $5,000 of his own cash. And who sets this rule? The Federal Reserve Board. 25%. Contrast that first number with this one. 25% is the maintenance margin equity floor for long equity positions. Once Carl is in the trade, his equity cannot drop below 25% of the total market value of the securities. If it does, he gets hit with a margin call, and the firm can actually liquidate his positions without even telling him first. So, the crucial point here is knowing exactly who is in charge of what. This is a classic exam trap, guys. They will try to trick you.
The initial entry bar is set by the Federal Reserve at 50%. The ongoing maintenance floor is set by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA, at 25%. Remember it like this. The Fed is the bouncer checking your wallet at the door. FINRA is the floor manager making sure you still have enough chips to stay at the table.
Section 4. Short sales. Betting on the dropped.
Now, Carl wants to borrow shares to sell securities he doesn't even own, just hoping to buy them back cheaper later. This is a short sale, and it is entirely forbidden in a cash account. Carl absolutely must use his margin account for this. And why is it so heavily regulated? Because of this huge exam trap. Theoretically unlimited risk. Think about it. When Iris buys a stock for $10, the worst that can possibly happen is it goes to zero and she loses $10. But Carl sold a stock short at $10. What if there's a buyout rumor and the stock rockets to $100 or $1,000 or infinity? A stock price has no fixed ceiling. Carl's unhedged short position means his potential losses are theoretically infinite.
Because of this wild risk, Carl is subject to strict short sale rules. These rules literally mandate that before Carl can even execute that short sale, the broker-dealer must perform a documented locate, meaning they have to actually find the shares to borrow. No selling thin air. It also dictates strict order marking, price test circuit breakers to prevent shorting a stock that's already plummeting, and really strict closeout rules for fails to deliver.
Section 5, Getting Paid. Adam the Advisor.
So we have Iris crossing spreads and Carl risking infinite ruin. Who is facilitating all this chaos, and how exactly are they getting paid? Let's bring in Adam the Advisor and his broker-dealer firm. Adam's firm wears two different hats, and how they charge depends entirely on which hat they're wearing. When the firm acts as a principal, think of this as being a dealer, they are trading directly from their own inventory account. If they sell a stock to Iris from their own garage, they charge a markup. If they buy it from her, they charge a markdown. But when the firm acts as an agent, think of this as being a broker. They go out into the open market on behalf of the customer's order to find the shares. For doing that matchmaking service, they charge a commission.
Time to pause the explainer again. Question for you. If Adam's firm goes above and beyond, can they charge Carl a markup and a commission on the exact same transaction? Take a beat to lock it in.
Exam trap. The answer is a massive absolute no. A firm cannot charge both a commission and a markup on the same transaction. They are either acting as a principal, charging a markup, or acting as an agent, charging a commission. The exam will give you scenarios describing compensation and ask you to identify the transaction type, or vice versa. Never let them tell you a firm charged both.
Now, there's another hidden way Adam's firm makes money. Payment for order flow, or PFOF. This is compensation the broker-dealer receives, whether in cash, rebates, or fee credits, from a market maker or venue simply for routing customer orders their way. It raises a massive potential conflict of interest. I mean, is Adam sending Iris's trade to the venue with the best execution, or just the venue paying Adam the highest rebate? Because of this, payment for order flow must be heavily and fully disclosed to the client.
All right, let's move to a rapid-fire recap and drill these final takeaways into your head. Recap number 1. A triggered stop order becomes a market order, meaning execution is highly likely. A triggered stop limit order becomes a limit order, meaning price is protected, but execution is definitely not guaranteed.
Recap number 2, margin rules. The Federal Reserve requires a 50% initial entry bar. Maintenance margin is set by FINRA, and it establishes a 25% ongoing equity floor for long equity positions.
Recap number 3, compensation. If a firm acts as a principal dealing from their own account, they charge a markup or a markdown. If they act as an agent brokering in the open market, they charge a commission. And they can never, ever charge both on the exact same trade.
Man, we covered a lot today, from Iris crossing that spread to Carl facing down infinite losses on his unhedged short sales, which leaves me with a final question for you to really ponder. With theoretically unlimited risk out there in the markets, what specific order type will you use to protect your next short position? Think about it, keep studying, and go crush the Series 66.